Hello again, and welcome to LinkedIn for Lawyers, true stories of client acquisition told by attorneys. My name is Vikram Rajan. I am the host. I'm also the co-founder of Video Socials. We are a video blogging community, of course, for attorneys, but also for accountants, coaches, and consultants, where they come on to our video blogging clubs and record their video blogs together, fun and done, and then use our automation software to get their videos out there on LinkedIn, of course, but also YouTube and Facebook and their WordPress websites, etc. Love for you to get to know Video Socials by being a guest. You can go to videosocials.net and learn more about us and become a guest. But today I have a very special guest, Darshan Kulkarni. Darshan, I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about what you do professionally, and then we'll start talking about how LinkedIn for Lawyers, how it is actually working for you, and tell us a little bit more about what you do professionally, because it's a pretty unique field.
You're very kind. So I am a food and drug lawyer. So my background is I'm a pharmacist. So I have a doctorate in pharmacy, went to pharmacy school, practiced as a pharmacist for about 20 years. While practicing as a pharmacist, I was in law school and became a lawyer and started my own law firm that focused on FDA regulatory law. I'm trying to remember. Can we say focus? We can't say specialized.
You can't say specialized. You can say concentrate, focused on. Most of my clients are in.
Exactly.
Yeah, very familiar with me doing attorney advertising.
I could tell. So I didn't specialize. I focused, most of my clients are in the life sciences, the type of work I usually end up doing is helping life sciences companies comply with the law and making sure that makes sense. So I do that in a few different ways. I come at it either from a clinical research perspective, which is kind of hot right now when you're talking about COVID, drug advertising perspective, which no one really likes, but kind of important to actually run a business. You have to be able to market, you have to be able to advertise. And then there's a whole area on patient centricity and transparency. So I get into that as well. As part of that, I write a few books. I serve on a few different boards, and quite honestly, I absolutely love what I do.
And it sounds, in addition to being an author of several books, so talk to us about the books. It sounds like maybe.
Sure, they are. I've written for the American Bar Association. I wrote 4 different books 4 different chapters for that book. So I wrote the chapter on drug advertising, the chapter on pharmacy compounding, the chapter on pharmacy reimbursement, drug reimbursement, and then medical devices. For that book, I wrote the chapter on the life sciences in India and what the implications of that are. And for that book, I wrote the chapter on clinical research. So done a little bit of that.
That's cool. So your clientele are mainly what, big pharma or research labs, or?
All of the above. So I've had clients who are big pharma and they're looking for, so I'd say my clients sort of divide into 2 separate buckets. I've got the big pharma clients who come to me for very, very specialized information, things like there's a law out there which requires at the European version and the Canadian version, this global transparency. So you've got to have clinical research that's out there, needs to be available to patients. This idea of cloak and dagger, what we do in the life sciences is magic and no one can know. Well, those days are coming to an end. People want to know the data. People want to see the data. People want to check the data. So the EU, Health Canada have come out and basically said, we're going to put out all your data. So you might decide to do, you're allowed to redact one of 2 things. One, what's called patient private information, which is basically patient information specifically.
Identifiable information.
Exactly. And then there's company confidential information. That one's a lot harder to do because it's this combination of trade secrets meets how should we put this? Trade secrets meets sort of this new regulatory standard of, is it really confidential? And that comes back to bite a lot of companies because they've never heard of it and find themselves on the wrong end of it. But that's sort of been that one niche of super focus. Focus. That's the word.
Focus.
Super focused. type of work that I do. And then I've got smaller companies that are CROs, clinical research organizations, ad agencies, anyone who's working with life sciences companies. And they're going, look, there are some incredible, great lawyers in these massive, large law firms. I can't afford to pay their bills. I'd rather have someone who knows what they're doing, who can help me. And they basically need everything from general counsel services to compliance officer services to FDA regulatory services, that I help with all of those as well.
Neat. That's good. And we were chatting offline, and maybe you don't call yourself a LinkedIn addict per se, but you are very proficient with LinkedIn. And you do a daily, relatively, right? And you do a daily live stream that we chatted about. Around what time of day, or do you have it on at the same time?
I aim for noon Eastern every single day. Okay. And I try to get someone who impacts life sciences. And the idea is I've had everyone from bioethicists, like world-renowned bioethicists, who can talk about, well, what is it like having giving COVID to patients who when we don't know what the impact of it is. All the way to Ajit Pai, who was the ex-chair of the FCC, who was talking about the value of how the FCC can work with the life sciences and what they've been doing to enable access to patients. So that's been an interesting conversation. I've had CEOs of pharma companies. I've had major advertising companies on there, CEOs of ad agencies, if you will, clinical research organizations, what's called medical affairs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's awesome. When did you start doing your LinkedIn Lives, and why?
I started doing LinkedIn Live probably October of last year. I've been doing podcasting since probably about 2009.
Okay. And do you turn your LinkedIn Lives into a podcast? So is it available through Apple Podcasts and other platforms?
I did that initially. I've sort of faltered recently. And the big reason I've faltered is because the amount of volume of material I'm churning out, it's just got too expensive to do it. Sure. I think I need to sort of maybe get back to it, but I need to choose which ones get converted, because there's just too much otherwise. Okay. But it was something that I actually found value in. And right now, I had my marketing guy, shout out to Major. He is available if people are looking for help. But Major actually helps me convert them into podcasts as well.
Cool. So that's why you started it, is why? To tap into the world of LinkedIn more effectively, or?
No, I started because I was bored. I started because I really like talking to people. and I started because I just wanted to talk to people about the life sciences. It's something I truly, truly, truly enjoy. And that's how it started. And then it evolved. It suddenly I went from I'm talking to my friends and trying to go, well, one of the questions I was asking is there are these exceptions in patent law around patents in the cases of urgencies and extreme emergencies. I could call up a friend and be like, yo, why is this happening? Because, I say yo all the time. But why is this happening? Instead, what I got was, well, what do they get out of it to just have this weird call with me? I figured let's just have it on LinkedIn and people can see how smart they are. And that's how that idea originated. I started talking to people, and it turns out I have a lot to say and a lot to hear about from a lot of smart people, and I have a lot of smart friends. So it worked out really well.
And has it actually led to business?
It's led to a ton of business.
Okay, let's talk about it. It's a nice segue for the theme of the show. So what is that part like? So part of it is a passion project. Part of it you were bored, you said, right? And of course, this is, passion meaning this is what you love learning about, love talking about, et cetera. And these are people who potentially could bring you business. So what is that segue like? Like, how has it impacted your practice?
So full disclosure, the way I started it was not because I was trying to generate business. And even today, it's not really because I want to generate business from it, which is probably the worst way you can do something.
I don't know. I would look. I mean, it's so long as I would almost say the opposite, right? That you don't necessarily want to only have a LinkedIn Live or a podcast, et cetera, where you're constantly hoping to pitch your guest. Like, that's not a good thing, because then it becomes very bait and switch, and it's a very contrived, like, oh, I'm just tolerating the interview so I can pitch you later. Like, that's actually probably the problem. That's really the worst way, right? I think your approach, all right, maybe it wasn't the strategic, clever way, or whatever, you have managed to be genuine. I'm assuming, right? I haven't actually watched it, but I'm assuming there's a genuine conversation. And so, give us an example of how did that actually transition? Where did that guest turn into a client? Did they refer you to someone else? Give us an actual example.
All of the above.
Okay.
At this moment, it's become my primary source of marketing. I've had people at the end of it go, look, you and I need to talk because I need to have some work done with you.
Yeah.
I've had clients recent, like literally this week. I had a guest over. I've actually interviewed her and her husband because they were in two different areas, and one's a lawyer, one's actually in medical affairs. And she was like, "Oh, we've been talking for years. We've been friends for probably about 6 years, but this time around, she was just like, I got to connect you with this company I'm working with. They need some help." And I spoke to the person today, and it was great. I'm excited to potentially work with them. And then there is, I've had clients who've reached out to me going, I saw your LinkedIn Live. I'd like to know more about what you're doing. And then I've had people give me introductions to people who had never even have known to ask an introduction to. Because the thing I started doing was going, okay, I'm talking to you. Who else do you think I should be talking to?
Right. I do the same thing. I'll be hitting you up for the same kind of thing. But right. So yeah, it's a good thing, right? One guest usually knows someone else like them who ought to be on your show.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't think of any of that.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I recently started asking, like, do you think there's anything that makes sense for us to talk about? And that became like something we started doing. In fact, the best part of doing LinkedIn Live for me was this idea that, and this is where my guests struggle a little bit, and I take full ownership of this, which is guests usually come on going, what are we going to talk about? And I go, I don't know. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, because I can literally off the top of my head, I could probably name one show where we spoke about what we actually thought we'd speak about. What's a lot more fun for me is sometimes like I'll have someone introduce themselves, and in that introduction they'll say one word that makes me go, oh, that's a really fun word, and let's explore that. And that's what the conversation ends up being about. So I literally start all of my interviews with, so what did you work on last week? And the reason I choose last week is it's something that they don't have to think about too much. They probably spent a little bit of time on it, and therefore they're going to know what that topic is. And that ends up being a spot that they're comfortable in, that they're talking about. I'm not trying to get company secrets. I'm just trying to learn something more about what they do.
And that inevitably stays on theme, on message with your show, right? Right. So it's going to be around life sciences. Have you ever had a situation where you're picking a word and does it veer on a tangent where it's not about life sciences, or you try to bring it back?
I don't try to bring it back. I mean, okay. I think they go on tangents every so often, but my thought is, in the end, people who impact life sciences probably impact something else as well. Okay. So, for example, I mean, you're looking behind me. That way, that one. If we were having a conversation about life sciences, that's great. But you might just look at that and go, "Well, what is that?" And those are when those are my national judo medals. So I was U.S. #2, India #3 in judo, and those are my medals. So, and then we can have a whole conversation about that. And the point being, when I did that, the idea would be, well, I impacted that area as well, and that's okay. People, I've had people who are retirement counselors come on and speak to what they do. I have someone that I'm very eager to interview who is someone who helps in selling businesses. And you would go, that has nothing to do with life sciences, except I'd argue people who are who have started companies often want to exit. What does that feel like? What are questions you want to ask? So in the end, we're all human, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that human connection. Did
you start off doing it daily, or did it evolve into daily?
It evolved into daily. Okay. And in fact, now at this point, I'm kind of trying to figure out how to scale it back a little bit.
That can be very intimidating, because part of what we do with Video Socials is we help our clients start video interview podcasts. For them to hear daily would scare the heck out of them. They're thinking like monthly. Hopefully, I can fit it in. We tend to say every other week is a nice round number. Weekly, if you can pull it off. Daily, we have one client who do does 3 a week, but that's rare. So for you to be candid enough to say that daily is maybe a bit too much for your own schedule, I appreciate that candor, because I think a lot of people listening or watching are going to be like, oh, I can't ever do anything daily.
I do it daily because there are too many people I want to talk to.
Yeah, look, your book, you mentioned you're booked into February. I'm booked into February, but I only do it weekly. So it's an easier way out. But yeah, it's easy to get booked because these are fun conversations to have. So it's important.
I mean, just think about the conversation we're having. Like, I'm already having fun. Usually I'm on the other side of the table. So it's a lot more fun to just kind of go, like, poke at the bear a little bit and let them just go off on it. But it's just a fun conversation. So
yeah, that's kind of cool. So you evolved to weekly. You may or may not be scaling it back. You mentioned something pretty intriguing that has become your now primary source of new business, which that's pretty intriguing. So how is that process like? Do you do any kind of formal follow-up, or it's a natural evolution? Like, with all candor, it's okay if either way, right? I mean, there's pluses and minuses to say, I have a CRM or highly organized. All right, good for you. And then there's a plus of going, no, it's just a natural sequence of events.
So here's the truth. This is where I'm allowed to say suck, because I suck.
Yeah, we can push right where it is. Feel free to say.
I'm trying to figure out a nice formalized way of doing things. It's just been a conversation with friends, and they landed up having business, which is great. But I really don't know how to take that to that next step of, okay, how do you go from I have these contacts to do you have work, to let me follow up with you? Because I found, for me, my average client is probably about 13 points of contact before they become a client.
Right.
And in some cases, like in the last 3 years, I'd say my 3 biggest clients, I've known them for probably about 10 years before they gave me any work.
Yeah.
Which I can't that's why I think
that happens to a lot of attorneys who work on very complex areas.
Really?
Yeah. As opposed to like a B2C, like an immigration, bankruptcy, those are more, right time, right place, criminal defense, right time, wrong place kind of thing. So, but when your kind of area, complex IP issues, even complex bankruptcy issues, like commercial bankruptcy, it takes a long time, right? I mean, it's like it's not a quick transactional sale, but neither is probably the project that when you work on your client, right? It's also not like, all right, we'll work together for a month and then see you later. It's probably over a course of a number of months, right? So, you can kind of see how the complexity of what you do leads to the complexity of, we'll call it, the sales process. So it's not unusual.
The best part of this type of networking is the type of weird things I get myself into. So one of the things I promised myself when I started my own career was that I didn't want to be bored.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people. So I see and talk and hear about a lot of lawyers who complain about how they don't like what they do. I can honestly, exactly, burnt out.
The whole cottage industry of attorneys, we've got. I know many of them who are also coaches for other lawyers, based on the chaos or their own sanity, based on emotional issues. I mean, as you know, I'm sure there are substance abuse issues, there are family issues that occur a lot among attorneys. For that reason, there's a cottage industry of attorneys helping other attorneys from a peer perspective and a business perspective. So I hear it as well. But
is there a cottage industry of attorneys who are just really, really happy with their job? Because that's where I fall in.
Yeah, I think it's a smaller cottage, but maybe that's a village and this is a cottage.
Yeah, probably.
That you fall into that category. So that's great. So you've been able to keep the passion up because you were able to stave off boredom, which is kind of the success.
Yeah, like recently, I tied hands with a couple of different law firms. And what they landed up doing is they don't do the type of work I do. I do some very specialized work. Funny thing is, I don't think it's that specialized until someone points out that it is. But I think, I love what I do. But so I've got my hands dirty with some really cool buy and sell agreements.
Cool.
And you think that that's normal in my line of work, but it's not been the general theme of what I did. But the more I work with corporate attorneys, the more fun it is, because they're thinking of the traditional, typical, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of IP stale
Yeah.
type of thing. Like I've got some intellectual property, I'd like to buy it. What they didn't consider are the downstream effects, which is very much where I fall in, and hopefully I add some value to these attorneys, because when they represent their clients, they get to go, look, we're not your typical rote sort of corporate attorneys. We're bringing this wider scale of knowledge and experience to the table, and that helps them hopefully sell better.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that it would, right? Because it's, adding value that much more. So that's really cool. So we talked about how you started. I'm bringing it back to the theme of the show. So if you keeping notes, so you talked about how you started LinkedIn Live practically daily. You do some kind of a follow up, but you need to kind of work on that a little bit better. But even with, dare I say, a lackluster follow up, it's been able to quote unquote convert into business, which is, I think, a real testament to how you run the LinkedIn Live show, and I guess how you build relationships and how you keep in touch with people, even if it's not a very systematic way. You're doing it effectively. That's not a bad thing. That's cool.
Yeah. So, I've had my marketing guy major with me for about 6 years now, and one of his biggest complaints with me has been, "So what do you do again? Could you tell me what you do, because we can then focus on that?" And every year, what I do changes. I'm making up dates here.
Is it really, or is it? Yeah. So elaborate on that.
Like, even I'm a little surprised by how much it changes.
Also, give me an example of how it changes.
I'll give you several. So I'd say, I'm making up dates here, but say 2016. The biggest clients I was working with were manufacturing companies, and they're trying to they're trying to bring a product to market. And what are the implications of, if you're a manufacturer, getting the right SOPs in place? So it's hardcore market manufacturing stuff. 2019 might be a major client who's trying to bring a product to market, and it is all about advertising compliance. 2020 might be clinical research, and what are the contracts associated with that. 2021, it might be global transparency issues, and they're all happening. You might get something that is a seed in 1 year becoming a full-blown tree in the next year, and then being dead the year after.
Okay, but it's all part of the same, lack of a better word, life cycle within the life sciences industry or sector, right? So it's, be it manufacturing or advertising, right? So it's at different phases of the same story arc, as I'm thinking.
I would agree with you, and to me it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But from a marketing perspective, it's terrible, because do you market to the advertisers? Do you market to the manufacturers? Do you market to the clinical research organizations? Who do I market to?
Yes, I guess it was all of the above, to quote you from earlier. So yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, fair enough. But you've been able to find a happy medium using LinkedIn. Is there any other aspect of LinkedIn that's worked tremendously for you?
I think for me, LinkedIn kept evolving. LinkedIn Live, I think, works especially well right now, because not everyone has LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, I mean, most likely they are going to make it open and public. I mean, it's conjecture. I mean, our app is with LinkedIn. So with LinkedIn automation, I tend to hear some things before others. I've heard nothing about them opening up LinkedIn. But I do know, unfortunately, that they're taking longer to approve LinkedIn Live applications, which is just some like complete conjecture and speculation that maybe that means they're going to open it up. Or not, like, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that at all. But I'm kind of hoping, for the sake of my clients, that they actually do open it up, which, to your detriment, right? It's no longer this special thing. In marketing, we're always looking ways to stand out, but a lot of attorneys prefer to fit in. So from that aspect, it'll do wonders for legal marketing when it comes to LinkedIn Live. But you've been able to ride the wave while you got it approved when others haven't.
Possibly, and I don't know what the magic sauce is. That's been one of my struggles, but it may be the fact that it's unusual, or it may be the fact what I really like about LinkedIn Live is, whether or not I like it, people get notified when I go live, which is great. So I have probably about 6,000 people on my LinkedIn. They get notified that I'm on. I had one person complain and tell me how dare I keep messaging him about it. I'm like, I don't. but he wasn't.
Right.
I don't even know who this person was, but he had some very choice words.
Yeah, worse than suck.
Yes, much worse than suck. But I think I think that's probably why LinkedIn doesn't want to go. Everyone has access to it because it's probably not in their best interest. Do you know? And I haven't looked into this, but is there the equivalent of Reels for LinkedIn?
No. There's no reels or shorts or anything like that with LinkedIn yet. I mean, other than you just doing your own version of a 1 minute, people do a 1 minute kind of thing on LinkedIn, but there's no prescribed way. LinkedIn video has, LinkedIn, as I'm sure you've noticed, is always kind of a step behind, let's say Facebook as like the main leader. So they kind of watch what works on Facebook and then go, which is why I think that they will actually end up going public with LinkedIn Live, because it has worked tremendously on Facebook Live. And of course, you get a lot of I would say you get a lot more of the riffraff on Facebook than you would with LinkedIn. But there's I haven't heard of them doing anything like a shorts or anything.
I would think it's a terrible idea if they do, because I feel like the shorts work more for a B2C type of customer.
The irony is, as much as while you're talking about video, I'm not a huge Clubhouse user, but I can see an audio conference room capability being a lot more effective, doing a private conference call essentially, and then having a broadcast capability of a conference call, which is all it is, on a LinkedIn, because we already are a professional platform. And so it makes sense for it to have its own audio podcasting type concept. So
I agree.
Sure when it premieres, you'll use it.
No, I think that's probably the direction to take it, as opposed to where things are. Instead of going down the B2C business to customer route, I think you're right. A Clubhouse version would probably work a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be careful, because I've always said for many years that, look, Facebook being this behemoth, there's more professionals of every ilk on Facebook than there are on LinkedIn. There are more lawyers on Facebook than there are on LinkedIn, except that when we're on Facebook, we're not wearing our suit, literally, figuratively, right? We're there to hang out with family, friends, etc. Even if it's socializing among lawyers, you guys are all hanging out as friends, not as attorneys per se, right? Where on LinkedIn, you are donning the suit, literally, or at least figuratively, and having the name badge and the business card and doing what we do at conferences. However, Facebook has been toying with Facebook Workplace, Meta doing the metaverse and going into kind of how Zoom and kind of conference calls can be reiterated and reimagined using AR and virtual reality. As they go full stream ahead, they are looking to, to use a romantic word of disrupt LinkedIn's stronghold. So it's to Microsoft and LinkedIn's advantage to figure out some other version. It's not going to be, hey, we can have an elephant avatar and things like that with what Metaverse wants, but it's going to have some kind of implication. Zuckerberg is not just a visionary out of nowhere. Obviously, we're going to go down the path of virtual reality, and we're all kind of sick and tired of Zoom meetings. Well, that's here to stay in one form or another. So, we'll see what LinkedIn does with all of that. Before I let you go, we're going to take a quick 1 minute commercial break. When we come back, I'd love to hear from you one more thing that you really love about LinkedIn. And then I'm sure there's something about LinkedIn that irritates you, that you really don't like, because most of us, there's finds at least one thing that we don't like. So hold that thought.
Absolutely.
Do you want your own podcast like this one? My team will do all the grunt work for you. Just show up, smile, and enjoy talking to your potential clients and referral relationships. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Are you a busy lawyer, coach, consultant like me? You should have a podcast done for you to get you more clients, impress your colleagues, and it becomes your perpetual referrals flywheel. We find you the right guests. We schedule your guests, handle all the podcast tech, get you into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and more. Done for you. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Now back to the show.
And back to our guest. Darshan, what is one thing that you love about LinkedIn?
I think the fact that the audience is a bunch of professionals. I think that to me is really the right fit for me. Yeah. I think that works really well for me. That's my taste. I think the thing I don't like the most is LinkedIn groups. They went from being really interesting and educational to just spammy.
I don't remember when LinkedIn groups was really awesome. And I've been on LinkedIn for a long time, but I guess maybe I was in the wrong group. But there was a time that it was productive.
Yeah, there was definitely a time when it was productive.
And then they tried to reimagine it. This was like 3-4 years ago at this point, and it was like, all right, that didn't go anywhere either. So
I don't know that they tried to reimagine it. You could be right. I feel like at some point Facebook groups took over.
Yes.
I remember at one point going, wait, Facebook has groups?
Yeah.
And then, that's how that played out for me.
Yeah. And it might have to do with the sticky nature of the social nature of Facebook. We're on it anyway, so I may as well just chat on it anyway.
But it always felt like the wrong fit for me. Like for me to be on Facebook.
From a professional standpoint, yeah.
Exactly. Because it's weird. I don't want to make friends with strangers in a non-professional environment. Except that's not 100% true because I love doing that on Twitter. So I think each network for me has a flavor.
Yeah.
And I guess on Facebook I want to talk to people who I know.
Right.
On Twitter I want to talk to people who I don't know. And on LinkedIn I just want to meet anyone who's in my world.
Right.
Which is why I think one of the things I've seen more and more of that, I'll be honest, I didn't realize was as big an issue, but women get harassed on LinkedIn, and that kind of bothers me. The idea that someone's going onto LinkedIn to ask for dates, like, it's ridiculous. Like, this is not the location for it, and that irks me because that's not the forum.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's a different topic for a different time. Unfortunately, I think every channel is abused in that way. So, I mean, it's hard for the two of us to really talk about that kind of an issue.
Right.
But nonetheless, I think it's a shame that any channel is abused in that way, where it's like, look, there's a time and place for things, and the workplace or a professional environment isn't that way, or at least not in a much more direct way. I think friendship or at least relationship can occur first.
Yeah.
For business as well, right? I mean, it goes back to the theme of this show of how to develop relationships and how to pitch appropriately, be it whatever you're pitching. But in a business context, right, it's a relationship first. And I think LinkedIn enables that to have a relationship more expediently.
I'll tell you another thing that really upsets me about
Yeah.
The spamminess of the reach outs.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like I don't get them as often on Twitter or on Facebook, but the people who sort of add you and either make immediate demands.
Yeah. What do you mean by demands?
So,
because that's a different word though. Let's say pitch.
No, so I'd say demands more than the pitch. So pitch bothers me bad enough because you're kind of going, but then you kind of remember that's how LinkedIn is paying the bills. So maybe to a certain extent I can tolerate that. But the people who are like, here's a webinar you need to jump on at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I'm like, I don't even know you.
Yeah, I don't need to. Yeah, there are very few things I need to do. And this
Exactly.
is not on the or maybe there's a lot I need to do, and this is not on the list.
Basically. So to me, those would be the things that irk me more than they probably should.
I think it goes back to the abusing of the channel and not recognizing that it's a relationship. Like, look, we don't really know each other that well, but I'm happy that you took the opportunity to come on our show and talk a little bit about your practice, but especially talk about how LinkedIn has actually worked. Absolutely. And that's the whole premise of the show, because we see all the time, right, of people doing not enough things or not enough of the right things or not the right things. And so LinkedIn doesn't work. And it's like, well, that's not really true.
Right.
If you do what Darshan does, you can make it work. It may not work in all circumstances, to use kind of the attorney advertising aspect, where it may not work for everyone in the same way, but it does work. And you're a true story of that.
I'll do one step better.
Yeah.
I actually spent a decent amount of money recently trying to explore where the Google AdWords would work for me.
Mm.
I couldn't get the ROI to sort of work.
Right.
So to me, what I've learned is I'm in a relationship business. For better or for worse, that's what I do. So I can't depersonalize it. I think there are certain types of lawyers, like for example, if you're searching for a criminal defense attorney, you want to show up pretty high up that list.
Right. They're getting carted off to jail and they're Googling and who can help me out.
Yeah. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who they're going, I'm betting my company what happens now.
Right. They're
And-
usually turning to one of their trusted sources, maybe the law
Exactly.
firm that they currently use for commercial stuff, and they know you because you're the specialist, if I can say that. And 'cause
I will neither confirm nor deny that.
yeah, exactly. So from that aspect, yeah, it's a relationship business, and thus LinkedIn helps, and the LinkedIn Lives become that much more so to kind of use that as a springboard in developing those relationships.
Yeah.
So this has been great. I hope this has been great for you. It's fun for me. Before I let you go, how do people get to know you and get a hold of you, either on LinkedIn or a website, or what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn at Darshan Kulkarni. So you can see my name. It's DARSHAN KULKARNI. You can also find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks. So DARSHANTALKS, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com.
That makes sense. Totally. Any last words?
This was fun. I'd love to do it again.
All right, good. We will. Again, my name is Vikram Rajan, host of LinkedIn for Lawyers. This has been another true story of client acquisition told by an attorney. You can catch this podcast as a video podcast on YouTube, of course, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, but also as an audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. My personal favorite is Stitcher. That's what I use on my Android. So feel free to subscribe. And if you happen to know another lawyer who has gotten a client or at least a qualified referral from LinkedIn, definitely send them my way. And I'm looking forward to featuring them in the future. Until next time, I will talk to you then. Thank you.
Thanks again, Vikram.